My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $200, $0 from our joint account to fund their affair, and now she's trying to claim half our house in a bitter legal battle. I never saw it coming. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story like this, but life has a way of throwing you into situations you never saw coming. It all started with what seemed like a normal week, but then suddenly everything flipped upside down. The most unexpected moment, finding out that my wife, Lisa, who I thought was the perfect partner, had been cheating on me with her boss, Mark. Not only that, she stole $200, $0 from our joint account to fund her affair. That's the kind of betrayal that hits you like a punch to the gut, and honestly, it still feels surreal even now. Lisa and I had been married for 8 years. We met in college. Had a good run, or so I thought. She was always a little bitchy at times, quick to dismiss my ideas, but I loved her. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed to have her life together. We bought a house together, had a nice routine, and I was proud that I could provide for us. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing little things. Missing money from our accounts, her phone always hidden, her getting unusually defensive when I asked questions. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was stressed or maybe just busy with work. Then I stumbled upon the truth almost by accident. It was a typical Tuesday evening when I decided to check our bank account because I noticed some irregularities. I saw a series of transfers, big ones, around the time I was out of town for work. The amounts added up to nearly $200, $0. My stomach dropped. I opened the transaction details and there it was, large sums sent to an account I didn't recognize. I immediately called our bank, but by then, Lisa had already come home, acting normal as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I waited until she was in the kitchen cooking, and then I asked her outright, "Lisa, what's going on with the money? Did you take that $200, $0? She froze for a second, then her face twisted into a scowl. "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're accusing me of," she snapped, rolling her eyes, but I pressed her, showing her the bank statement. Her face went pale, and suddenly she started her usual deflections. "It's a mistake," she said. "Maybe someone hacked the account, or you're overreacting, it's nothing." But I knew better. I knew she was lying. That's when I started to piece things together. Her recent behavior had been off, secretive texts, late nights at networking meetings, and the way she always kept her phone closed even during dinner. She'd get defensive if I asked about her whereabouts or her phone. She'd lie about small things, but I always felt like there was more beneath the surface. Still, I never thought she'd actually steal from us or cheat behind my back. I mean, she always said she loved me, right? That's what makes this so damn hard to accept. The worst part was realizing she'd been lying for months. She'd been sneaking around, probably with Mark, her boss, an arrogant guy who's always been a little too interested in her. I found out through a mutual friend that Lisa and Mark had been seen together at fancy restaurants, staying late at the office, even going on trips that she never told me about. I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? I felt a mixture of anger, heartbreak, and a deep sense of betrayal I never thought I'd experience in my own marriage. I remember sitting alone in our living room after discovering it all, staring at the bank statement, feeling numb. All the plans we made, the dreams we shared, they suddenly seemed meaningless. I was furious that she could just steal that kind of money, that she could lie to my face and pretend everything was fine. I felt humiliated, not just because she cheated, but because she stole from us, our future, our stability. The trust was shattered, and I knew I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. I had to confront her, but I didn't know what to expect. Would she admit it? Would she deny everything? Or would she try to gaslight me into believing I was crazy? As I sat there, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could do nothing and let her continue to lie, or I could face her head on. I decided I had to confront her, but I also knew that once I did, There was no going back to how things were. My mind was racing, trying to process what this all meant for us. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to fight to save my marriage or decide if I could even trust her again. The betrayal ran deep, and I knew I'd have to dig deep to find the strength to deal with whatever was coming next. The confrontation with Lisa didn't happen right away. Honestly, I wasn't in any rush. I needed to gather my thoughts and figure out what I was going to say. Part of me wanted to believe she'd deny everything, that maybe I was overreacting, that it was all a huge misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. The evidence was too clear, and the way she was acting, defensive, dismissive, confirmed it. Still, I wanted to hear her lie to my face to see how far she'd go to deny her actions. It was a few days later when I finally sat her down in the living room, the air thick with tension. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Lisa, I know what you did. I saw the bank statement. The money is gone, and I know it's because of you and Mark." Her eyes widened for a moment, then she threw her head back and scoffed. "You're insane. You're accusing me of something I didn't do. You're just jealous because I've been working late and you're paranoid." Her tone was sharp, her voice dripping with sarcasm, but I wasn't buying it. I told her I had proof, that I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. She started to lie. That's what she's good at, lying, twisting the truth, making herself look like the victim. She said she was at a spa all day, that Mark was just helping her with a project at work, and that I was overreacting because I didn't trust her. She played the victim card, crying a little, saying she loved me but was just trying to do her best. I saw right through her act. I knew she'd been planning this for months, probably since the day she started working for Mark. She'd been grooming herself for the affair, and the money, that was just the icing on the cake. I felt a whirl of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a deep, aching disappointment. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she betray me like this? I'd always believed in honesty, in partnership, in loyalty. And now it felt like everything was a lie. She was trying to convince me she was innocent, but her lies only confirmed what I already knew deep down. She was cheating, stealing, and trying to gaslight me into believing I was the crazy one. I told her I needed space to think, that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. When she left the room, I sat there, staring at the empty space where she'd been, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing over every moment, every sign I'd ignored, every time I'd dismissed her strange behavior. It was clear now that she'd been lying for a long time, and I'd been blind to it. The next morning, I started digging into the finances more. I needed to know exactly how much she took, where it went, and how she managed to hide it from me. I hired a private investigator just to get a clearer picture. Turns out she transferred the money into multiple accounts, some in her name, some in her sister. She'd even used it to buy expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and paid off her credit cards. All the signs pointed to her planning this for months. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up the act of being the innocent wife. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of spying on her, call me paranoid. She'd lie about her whereabouts, claim she was at yoga or visiting her mother. But I knew better now. I could see the cracks in her story. She was trying to cover her tracks, but she was terrible at it. Every day brought a new lie, a new excuse, a new attempt to make me doubt myself. It was also around this time that I discovered her affair wasn't just about the money. She'd been sleeping with Mark, her boss, for months. I found explicit messages on her phone, exchanged late at night, full of sexual innuendos, promises, and plans to meet up. She'd even told him she was done with me, that she wanted to leave and start fresh with him. That hurt worse than anything, seeing her words, knowing she'd been unfaithful, and knowing she'd used the money to fund their secret life. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, but I couldn't wake up. Every new piece of evidence made me angrier, more betrayed. I started questioning everything: our marriage, her love, my own judgment. I'd always been the stable, dependable guy, the one who believed in honesty and loyalty. And now, I was the fool who got played. I'd been by her bitchy attitude, her lies, her sneaky ways. I wasn't just betrayed, I was humiliated. But I knew I couldn't just sit there and let her get away with it. I had to decide what to do next. Confronting her was step one, but I knew the fallout would be huge. I wasn't sure if I wanted to save the marriage or cut my losses. All I knew was that I couldn't let her keep doing this, not without consequences. I started to plan my next move, how to protect myself legally, how to get my fair share, and how to handle the emotional I was on. This whole thing changed me. I never saw myself as a vengeful person, but now I was starting to think differently. If she thought she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of this, she had another thing coming. I was determined to get justice, not just for the money, but for the betrayal of everything I believed in. I didn't know how this was going to end, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her ruin me without a fight. After I gathered enough evidence and confirmed the extent of Lisa's betrayal, I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was consult with a lawyer, someone who knew about divorce, assets, and the legal mess I was about to get into. I wasn't naive. I knew Lisa would try to spin everything and claim she was the victim, especially with her bitchy attitude and her talent for lying. I had to be prepared, not just emotionally, but legally. I needed to protect myself and figure out what my rights were, especially regarding the house and the stolen money. The lawyer told me that with the evidence I had, bank statements, messages, and the proof of her affair, I stood a good chance of winning any legal battle. But the real issue was the $200, $0 she stole. That money was gone, but I could pursue some sort of restitution, especially since I had proof she transferred it to multiple accounts. The house, though, that was trickier. Lisa's already claiming half of everything, and she's trying to paint herself as the wronged wife. I knew she was setting the stage for a bitter legal fight, so I had to get ahead of her. While I was doing all this, Lisa kept up her act. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of spying, call me paranoid, standard bullshit. She'd cry, scream, and try to guilt-trip me into backing off. But I wasn't falling for it. I'd learned her game. I kept my cool, gathered more evidence, and started preparing for the worst. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, maybe even lie her way into getting more money or a bigger share of the house. That's when I decided to implement a tight surveillance on her, checking her phone, monitoring her movements, and making sure she wasn't hiding anything. One day, she got even more aggressive. She started to threaten me, saying she'd take everything I own if I didn't stop accusing her. That was the moment I realized she'd become completely unhinged. She was trying to scare me into backing down, but I knew I had to stand my ground. I told her that if she kept lying and stealing, she'd face serious legal consequences and I'd fight her in court. I also made sure to document every interaction, every lie, every attempt she made to turn the tables. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. In the middle of all this, I started to feel a strange mix of emotions, anger, frustration, but also a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been putting up with her bitchy attitude for too long, excusing her bad behavior because I loved her. But love doesn't mean accepting betrayal and theft. I had to think about myself, about my future. I couldn't let her walk all over me, especially after what she'd done. The betrayal ran so deep that I started to question everything. Our entire relationship, my own judgment, whether I'd missed the signs all along. To make matters worse, Lisa's manipulative side came out even more. She started claiming I was controlling, that I was spying on her and invading her privacy. She tried to turn friends and family against me, painting herself as the innocent victim of a jealous, paranoid husband. That only fueled my resolve. I knew her game and I wasn't going to fall for her lies. I kept my distance, collected more evidence, and prepared for the inevitable legal battle. Meanwhile, I also started to reach out to some of her colleagues and friends, people who knew about her affair or suspected her behavior. I needed allies, people who could testify to her actions if it came to court. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace the stolen money and figure out exactly where it went. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that she'd planned this for months. The money was used to fund her affair, buy her designer stuff, and pay off some of her debts. It was sickening to realize how far she'd gone just to keep her secret life afloat. As I sat in my apartment, feeling the weight of everything, I couldn't help but think about how much I'd lost: trust, stability, a future I thought was certain. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I was left with nothing but betrayal. But I also knew I couldn't just give up. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine. I was determined to get justice, to hold her accountable for her lies and theft, and to rebuild my life from the ruins she left behind. That's when I made a decision. I'd file for divorce, pursue every legal avenue available, and make sure she paid for what she'd done. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences. I wasn't going to be her punching bag or her fool anymore. I'd been sucker punched enough. Now it was time to stand up, fight back, and reclaim what little dignity I had left. The road ahead was going to be long and messy, but I was prepared. I had to be. By the time I had everything lined up, lawyers, evidence, and a clear plan, Lisa's behavior got even more erratic. She started acting like she was untouchable, throwing fits, trashing the house, and even trying to gaslight me more. She'd say I was crazy, that I was paranoid, and accuse me of turning everyone against her. But I knew better. I had seen the messages, the transfers, and the way she'd been lying about her whereabouts. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. One afternoon, she went full-blown bitchy on me. She yelled that I was ruining her life, that I was possessive and controlling, and that she'd fight me in court for everything. She even claimed I was abusive, something she knew would hurt me, but I just kept my cool. I told her she was a liar, a thief, and that her days of manipulating everyone were over. I told her she'd have to face the consequences of her actions, and I was dead serious. In the meantime, I started preparing for the legal fight. I hired a forensic accountant who traced the stolen $200, $0. Most of it was spent on her affair, some on luxury clothes, jewelry, and paying off her credit cards. She used the money to fund her secret trips, her nights out with Mark, and even paid Mark himself some hush money. I found receipts for hotel stays, plane tickets, and fancy dinners, all paid with our stolen money. It made me sick. The house was another big issue. Lisa was already claiming she deserved half, even though I'd paid for most of it. She started filing papers, claiming she was entitled to community property, and that she'd been a co-owner all along. I knew this was her attempt to squeeze more out of me, to get her hands on the house and whatever else she could. I had to be ready for a fight, so I started documenting everything. My contributions, the mortgage payments, the renovations I paid for myself. It was around this time I also realized she'd been lying about her affair with Mark. I found explicit messages, flirtatious texts, and even some photos. She told me she was just working late, but it was clear she was sneaking around. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me, steal from us, and then try to turn it all around and make me look like the bad guy? I decided to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I sat her down and showed her the evidence, screenshots of the texts, receipts, everything. I told her I knew about her affair, about the money, and that she couldn't keep lying anymore. Her reaction: she got even bitchier, saying I was crazy, that I was stalking her, and that she'd take everything I had. She screamed at me, called me possessive, and accused me of trying to control her life. But I just looked at her and said, "You've already lost control, Lisa. You're the one who's been lying and stealing. That's why I'm done playing your game." I felt a strange sense of relief after that. For the first time in months, I'd taken control of the situation. I was tired of the lies, the manipulations, and the betrayal. I knew I had to finalize the divorce, push for the legal settlement, and make her pay for what she'd done. I was determined to get my share of the house, the money she stole, and to rebuild my life without her dragging me down. But it wasn't easy. Lisa kept trying to manipulate the process, calling friends, trying to get sympathy, and even threatening me with more lies. She threatened to ruin my reputation, to claim I was abusive, or that I was the one cheating. She was trying everything she could to turn the tables, but I refused to let her. I had enough evidence and enough resolve to see this through. I knew this would be a long, ugly fight, but I was ready for it. In the weeks that followed, I filed the divorce papers, started the legal proceedings, and made sure to document everything. I also made a plan for what I wanted: full custody of the house, a fair division of assets, and full restitution of the stolen money. I wanted her to understand that her actions had serious consequences. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a free ride. not after everything she'd done. As I sat in my apartment reflecting on everything, I realized how much I'd changed. I'd gone from a naive, trusting husband to someone hardened by betrayal. I'd learned that some people, even those closest to you, can be capable of incredible betrayal. But I also learned that I had strength I didn't know I possessed. I'd fight for what's right, no matter how bitter and ugly it gets. And even if I end up alone, I'd rather be alone than with someone who's lied and stolen from me. That's the lesson I take from all this. Trust is earned and betrayal cuts deep. But I'll come out of this stronger, I promise myself that. The legal battle was everything I expected and more, long, exhausting, and emotionally draining. Lisa was relentless, pulling every trick in the book to try and sway the court in her favor. She'd lie, manipulate, and even try to pin the blame on me, claiming I was some controlling, jealous husband who was paranoid about her success. She played the victim, crying in court about how she just wanted to find happiness, all while trying to claim half the house that I had worked so hard to pay for. Honestly, it was infuriating to see her spin her web of lies, but I had my evidence, and I made sure everything was documented. The biggest fight was over the house. She claimed she'd been a co-owner all along, even though I knew she'd never contributed financially the way I had. I had paid the mortgage, paid for renovations, and kept the bills up to date, yet she was trying to claim half based on some vague emotional investment. I had proof of all the payments I'd made, and I presented it clearly in court. I also had a forensic accountant testify about the stolen money, showing how she'd used it to fund her affair and buy luxury items. When Lisa saw the evidence against her, she started to get more aggressive. She yelled, calling me a narcissist, a control freak, and accused me of ruining her life. Her bitchy attitude was on full display, and she tried to turn everyone against me, friends, family, even the judge. But I stayed calm, sticking to the facts, and refused to be baited into her emotional games. I knew if I lost my temper or let her manipulate the situation, I'd be the one paying the price. One of the most intense moments was when Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to a large settlement because she sacrificed her career to support the family. That was laughable. I paid for everything, her clothes, her trips, her lifestyle, and she was trying to claim some kind of equal partnership when she'd been secretly screwing her boss and stealing from us. I shot down her claims with the evidence I had, pointing out how she'd been living beyond her means on stolen money and how her affair was the real reason for the breakdown of our marriage. Meanwhile, I was also fighting to get full custody of the house. I knew Lisa would do everything to try and get half, but I had the better case. I had paid for most of the house, contributed more financially, and had the receipts to prove it. I also presented evidence that Lisa's behavior, her lies, her secret trips, her affair, made her an unfit parent in her current state. I wasn't trying to ruin her, but I knew I had to protect myself and my future. The court proceedings dragged on for months. Every hearing was a new battlefield of lies, accusations, and legal arguments. I stayed consistent, calm, and factual. I refused to stoop to her level of manipulation. I knew she was trying to wear me down, but I was determined not to let her. I had my lawyer, my evidence, and my resolve. Every day I woke up knowing I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and the little bit of respect I still had for myself. The final verdict was a relief. The judge awarded me full custody of the house, ordered Lisa to pay back the stolen money, and limited her access to the children due to her reckless behavior. She was furious, screaming and crying outside court, but I felt nothing but a sense of victory. I had proven my point and I had taken back control of my life. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had done the right thing. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown. I went from trusting husband to someone who's had to fight tooth and nail just to keep what's his. I learned that betrayal can come from the people you trust most, and sometimes, even the people you love can turn into enemies. But I also learned that I have strength I never knew I possessed, strength to stand up, fight back, and rebuild. Most importantly, I learned that I can survive this. I can move on even if it's hard. I've started therapy, focusing on healing myself emotionally, and I've begun to rebuild my life. I've realized I don't need someone who lies, steals, and cheats to be happy. I just need to be true to myself, keep my integrity intact, and never let anyone treat me like I'm disposable. And as I sit here now, reflecting on everything, I can honestly say I'm finally starting to feel free. The pain of betrayal still lingers, but I know I'll come out stronger. The story isn't over, but I've taken the first steps toward a new life, one where I choose honesty, loyalty, and respect. That's the lesson I want anyone reading this to take away. Trust is fragile, and if someone proves unworthy of it, you have to be willing to fight for yourself. Because in the end, your own integrity is all you really have. The aftermath of everything has been a whirlwind, honestly. The court case, the legal battles, the emotional, it all took a toll. But in the end, I feel like I've come out of it with a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. Lisa's gone, her lies exposed, and I've managed to reclaim some semblance of stability, even if it's been hard to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. Living alone now, I've realized how much I'd been blinded by love, how I overlooked the signs, the little betrayals that accumulated over time. The money she stole, her affair with Mark, her bitchy attitude, those weren't just one-time mistakes. They were the symptoms of a bigger problem. I learned that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something that has to be earned and maintained. When someone shows they're willing to betray that trust, you have to protect yourself, even if it hurts. I've also learned that revenge isn't just about getting back at someone. It's about reclaiming your dignity. I don't dwell on her anymore. I focus on my healing and my future. I've started saving again, focusing on my career and rebuilding my confidence. I've cut out all the toxic people who enabled her or tried to manipulate me during the process. The ones who stood by me, who believed in my version of the truth, that's what matters now. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I wish I hadn't ignored the little red flags, her secretive phone habits, her lying about where she was going, the way she'd get defensive over minor questions. But I guess nobody wants to believe the worst about the person they love. Still, I tell myself that ignorance is no excuse. From now on, I'll be more cautious, more aware. I'll trust but verify, and I'll never let myself be again. One thing I've realized is that betrayal changes you. It forces you to confront your own vulnerabilities and question your judgment. But it also teaches you resilience. I've learned that I can survive the worst, and I can rebuild from nothing if I have to. It's a painful lesson, but it's a necessary one. Now I see my life in a different light, more cautious, more aware, but also more determined to find happiness on my own terms. As I move forward, I plan to focus on myself, to heal, to grow, and to find peace. I understand now that I don't need someone who lies and steals to be complete. I'm enough on my own. The betrayal was a blow, but it also set me free from someone who was never truly right for me. I hope that anyone reading this who's going through something similar realizes they're not alone. Trust your instincts, stand your ground, and never let anyone make you feel small or unworthy. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect, just like I do, and I've finally learned to demand it.